Good evening. So this evening we are beginning a new class. So this will run every Tuesdays, and it will consist of a period of meditation. We'll start with maybe half an hour or so of meditation, and then we'll have a break, and then I'll give a talk about different aspects of Buddhism, starting with basic things. So you're free to just come for the meditation if you wish. You don't have to stay for the talk, but so there'll be a break in between. So then you can decide if you want to stay or not. So I'd like to know if any of you are new to meditation, have not done meditation before, or relatively new. Very new. Very complete beginner. Okay. Well, that's fine, because I usually do start by giving some basic instructions. So I hope this won't be boring for those of you who are advanced, highly experienced meditators. Sometimes it's helpful to hear the same things again and again. So one thing is, it's important to understand what is the real reason or purpose for doing meditation in Buddhism, because meditation is something that we find in many different religions and spiritual traditions. And also people practice meditation without being part of a particular religion or spiritual tradition. So like secular meditation. For example, nowadays a lot of people are practicing meditation to relieve pain and stress and other kinds of medical problems, physical problems, emotional problems, and so on. So they're not practicing meditation necessarily as part of a religion or a spiritual tradition. So there's many different types of meditation and many different ways that you can practice meditation. But since here we are a Buddhist center, and we do try to follow the tradition started by the Buddha that's been existing for about more than 2,500 years now. And so within Buddhism, the real purpose of practicing meditation is not just to feel better, to be more relaxed, to be more healthy, to have less pain and so forth, but it's actually to work on transforming our mind. And the whole topic of mind is a big topic in Buddhism. What exactly is the mind, and how it works, and what does it mean to transform the mind? But just in a simple way, the mind is that part of us that experiences things. So it includes all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, our feelings, our memories, our dreams, our fantasies, and also our basic perceptions: seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and so forth. So all those experiences are included in the mind, what we call mind in Buddhism, or it could also be called consciousness. Sometimes we use the word consciousness and mind interchangeably. And according to Buddhism, the mind is not a physical thing. It's not a part of the body. It's not the brain. And it's also not like completely dependent on the brain or produced by the brain. It's a different kind of phenomena. It's actually said to be non-physical, a non-physical phenomena. And the mind is definitely changeable. It is something that can be changed, that can be transformed. And when we talk about transforming the mind in Buddhism, what we mean by that is we wish to have more states of mind, more experiences that are positive. Positive meaning they're conducive for happiness, for peace, both for ourselves and for others, for the world. So, for example, kindness, love, compassion. Those are aspects of the mind that are positive, because when we have them within ourselves, we feel good, we feel happy. And when we have these states of mind in relation to other people, we treat others with kindness and compassion and so forth, they usually feel happy as well. So it's good for us and it's good for others, good for the world, if we can have those states of mind. So we have those states of mind already within us, and what we want to do is increase them, develop them more and more, so we feel that way more of the time. And also, transforming the mind means trying to reduce those aspects of the mind that create suffering or problems. These are sometimes called destructive emotions or afflictive emotions. So they include things like anger, hatred, greed, jealousy. And we have those in our mind as well. Those come up sometimes. And when they come up, when we are experiencing those states of mind, we don't feel good. They're disturbing. They disturb our own happiness and peace of mind. They also disturb our health. Over the last few decades, scientists have done research on different types of emotions and how they affect our body and our health. And they find evidence that anger and fear and different kinds of disturbing emotions are bad for us, bad for our health, and can lead to illness and shorten our life. So there's actually scientific evidence that these emotions are not good for us. And they also aren't good for other people, because when we get angry or we act with greed and jealousy and so forth, then we can hurt others, create problems for others and for the world. So working on our mind, transforming our mind, also includes trying to decrease those, trying to have less of those states of mind. So basically, transforming the mind means increasing the positive, beneficial states of mind, the ones that lead to happiness and peace, and decreasing the disturbing negative states of mind, the ones that lead to problems, unhappiness, and suffering. And so the tool or the method for bringing about transformation of the mind is meditation. Mainly it's meditation. So that's the real purpose in Buddhism of practicing meditation. And there's many different kinds of meditation. But in this class, we'll mainly do a basic meditation. Mainly it's meditation. So that's the real purpose. Who's that? So in this class, we'll mainly be doing a fairly basic type of meditation involving the breath. And one way of using the breath is to develop what we call mindfulness. So mindfulness, it can have different meanings, but a common, popular, well-known meaning of mindfulness is just being aware, being attentive of whatever's going on moment by moment. And that is a very important sort of quality or ability to have, because otherwise there's the danger that sometimes from the sort of the depths of our mind, some disturbing emotion or thought can creep up. And if we don't notice it, then it can sort of grow bigger and bigger and pretty soon take over our mind. And then our mind just gets totally carried away with that particular disturbing thought or emotion. And if we have mindfulness, if we have the ability to pay attention to what's happening inside of us and also what's happening around us and so on, then we'll be more likely to notice when that type of thought is starting to come up in our mind, and then we can do something about it before it gets too big and out of control, out of hand. But mindfulness has other benefits as well. It helps us to be more relaxed, less stressed, and helps us to deal with the various problems and issues that come up in our life. and help us keep in a state of mind that's more calm and peaceful, more clear and focused. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much because I want to have time to meditate, but I'll just mention the ideal way of sitting for meditation, because even though the mind is of a different nature than the body, it's still affected by the body, dependent on the body. So what happens with our body affects our mind, and vice versa. What happens in our mind affects our body. So the way that we sit, the way that we hold our body when we're meditating will have an effect on our meditation. And so meditators for thousands of years have found that a particular way of sitting is most helpful or most conducive for a meditative state of mind. So this way of sitting mainly involves keeping the back straight. So whether you're sitting on the floor or you're sitting on a chair, try, if you can, to have a straight back. You might imagine there's a string tied to the top of your head and somebody's pulling it from above, so helping you to have a straight back. But other than the back being straight, the other parts of the body should be relaxed as much as possible. So let your shoulders drop. Don't have your shoulders tight and tense, but let them drop and be loose and relaxed. And the position of the hands, there are different ways of doing this in different traditions, but in the Tibetan tradition, as I've learned it, we put our right hand on top of our left hand with the fingers lined up like this, palms facing upwards. And then the two thumbs, the tips of the two thumbs are touching like that, making a kind of triangle. And there's a reason for that. It has to do with the flow of energy in the body being most conducive. But if you've already learned another way of holding your hands and you prefer that, that's okay too. This is just the Tibetan way. And then don't press your arms against your sides, but leave them a little bit away. Just like so there's some space between your arms and the sides of your body. And it's also said it's better to have the head tilted downwards a little bit, not held up too high nor bent too low, but just slightly inclined downwards. And have your mouth closed and the tip of the tongue touching the roof of the mouth behind the upper teeth. So doing that will reduce the need to swallow. You won't have to swallow so much when you're meditating. And then as for the eyes, it's recommended that we don't close our eyes completely, because doing that can lead to sleepiness. Just like when we go to bed at night or lie down to have a nap, we close our eyes and go to sleep. So we don't want to fall asleep when we meditate. We want to stay awake. So to prevent sleepiness, it's recommended to keep your eyes open a little bit. And you can be looking down onto your lap or on the floor in front of you. That way there's some light coming into your eyes, and that helps you to stay awake. But your eyes aren't fully open, because if you open your eyes fully, then there's more chance of getting distracted by things that you see or movements in the room and so on. So having them just partially open is a good sort of middle way between totally closed and totally open. But you might, if you're not used to doing this, you might find it rather difficult. You might find your eyelids fluttering, and that becomes a distraction. So it is okay to close your eyes if it's too difficult to leave them open. But if you do close your eyes, just try to notice if you are starting to fall asleep. And if you are, then try opening them a little bit. Okay, so try to sit in that position. And then with your legs, if you're sitting on the floor, just have your legs crossed in whatever way is comfortable for you. And if you're sitting on a chair, just have your 2 feet flat on the floor. So now it's important to try to be relaxed when we meditate. But sometimes when we sit down, we might have some tension in our body. So just take a few moments to look into your body. Try to notice if there's tension in any part of your body. For example, sometimes we have tension in the shoulders or in the back, in the neck. So if you do notice tension anywhere in your body, see if you can just imagine that it melts and flows down and sinks into the earth. So just let it drop away from your body and go into the earth and then disappear, leaving your body feeling light and free of tension as much as possible. Another way that we can be more relaxed and free of tension is to take a couple of deep breaths. So breathing in very deeply and slowly, and then pausing for just a moment, and then breathing out slowly. So let the breath go out very, very slowly. And you might imagine that any tension in your body or in your mind goes out with the breath when you breathe out. So do that for 3 breaths, and then just resume a normal rate of breathing. So for the rest of the time that we're meditating, do the best you can to keep your body free of tension. Try not to let tension build up in any part of your body. If you do notice that happening, then see if you can just be aware of that point, that place in your body, and relax the tension, let go of the tension. So now the main object we're going to focus on during the meditation is the breath. But ideally we do this without controlling the breath. Some people find when they try to pay attention to the breath, they unconsciously or unintentionally start manipulating, controlling the breath. So try not to do that, because there's really no reason to do it. Our body knows how to breathe. It's breathing all the time. Just by itself, it doesn't need us to control it. So try to let go of the tendency to control and just let your body breathe naturally in and out. And try your best to keep your mind, your awareness focused on the breath coming in and going out. And there's different ways you could do this. One is to pay attention to your abdomen, which is moving in and out with each breath. So you can just observe the sensations in your abdomen as the breath is coming in and going out. Another common way of watching the breath is to focus at the nostrils. It's like the doorway where the breath is coming in and going out. So you might be able to feel some subtle sensations around the nostrils or on the upper lip as the breath is coming in and going out. So you could just keep your attention focused there. Or you might find some other way of observing the breath. So when the Buddha taught meditation on the breath, he didn't specify how to watch the breath. He just said, watch the breath. So that's the main thing. The main thing is to watch the breath. Be aware of the breath as it's coming in and going out. And try to do this continuously, one breath after another. But you'll probably find that that's difficult to do because thoughts come up, thoughts pop up in the mind. You'll start thinking about something that happened earlier today or any time in the past. Or you might start thinking about plans you have for later tonight or tomorrow or sometime in the future. Or you'll start thinking about your problems, your work, people. So there's millions of different thoughts that might pop up in our mind when we try to meditate. And this is normal. Don't be surprised. Don't be upset. It's just the way that our mind normally works. So what we need to do is when we notice our mind has gotten caught up thinking something, to disengage, let go of this thought, put it aside. You can always take it up again later if it's important, but just decide that for now you're not going to let yourself think about other things, and instead just come back to the breath. So let go of or put aside thoughts and keep coming back to the breath. And even if you have to do that again and again and again, it's okay. That's normal. So be patient. Don't be impatient with yourself. Just keep coming back to the breath. And one thing you might want to do, one thing that can be helpful, is counting. So if you're new to meditation, just count up to five breaths, and then start again at 1. If you're more experienced, you could count up to 10 or up to 20, or just continuously count until your mind wanders away and then go back to 1. So it's not necessary to count, but it can be helpful to keep your mind focused on your breathing. So one way of counting is to just say to yourself, breathing in, breathing out 1, breathing in, breathing out 2, and so on up to 5 or 10 or whatever number you choose. And then when you reach that number, go back to 1. So there are many little details about the practice of meditation that we'll look at as we go along. But one thing I'll mention right now is about moving, because I think it's normal that when we try to sit still for a period of time, we might feel some discomfort, maybe even some aches, pains. And there's this wish to move, to stop this discomfort and get more comfortable. And there are different opinions about whether or not we should move when we meditate. In some traditions, you're told not to move at all, just, stay really still. And there's this tradition in Zen. I don't know about all the Zen monasteries, but they have somebody with a stick who'll come around and hit you if you move. So it's really strict, that just sit still and not move at all. But my teachers have said, it's okay to move. It's important to be comfortable, because if there's too much pain in the body, then it becomes difficult to meditate. But there's one piece of advice which I think is quite helpful, because the thing is, if we move too much, then it disturbs the mind. Every time we move our body, our mind will get disturbed. So if we want to have a more calm, peaceful, focused state of mind, it's better to try not to move too much. So what some teachers say is, when you feel this impulse to move, to change your position, get to a more comfortable position, the first time that impulse comes up, ignore it. Just keep sitting. And then it may come up again, second time. So again, ignore it. And then when it comes up the third time, then you can move. So that seems to be quite a good approach, because for one thing, we probably have this tendency to just move every time we feel like it. As soon as the impulse to move comes up, we do it. So if we carry that into our meditation, then we're going to be moving all the time, and our body won't be still, and it'll be harder to have a still state of mind. So it's good to try to learn some discipline and not just move every single time we feel like it. So if you wait till the third time this feeling, this impulse to move comes up, then you're sort of training yourself to be a little bit more disciplined. But another thing is that whatever discomfort you are feeling that leads to the wish to move might just go away by itself. So if you don't move as soon as you feel like it, then maybe that will pass. You won't need to move after all. So you're giving your body a chance to sort of let go on its own of whatever discomfort there is. So anyway, the bottom line is, it is okay to move, but try not to do it every single time you feel like it. Try to sit still, but not to the extent that you're torturing yourself. Okay, so that's not necessary to, let yourself be in a state of agony. And also, if you do move, and if you're sitting in a group of people like this, it's good to be mindful of the fact that if you move and make a lot of noise, then you might disturb other people. So if you do have to move, try to do it quietly and in an undisturbing way to others. And also mindfully, try to just be aware of the movement and the feelings, the sensations taking place as you move. Okay. Do any of you have a question you'd like to ask about what we were doing or about meditation? Yeah.
I have one about the moving thing, because I tend to fall down when I sit, and then straighten myself up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of under the sway of the illusion that was like good thing, straighten yourself up sometimes and keep it back straight.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I'm talking more about movement, like, you start feeling some pain in your knee and you want to move like that. No, but yeah, if you notice that you're kind of slouched, your body is kind of fallen down, then it is good to sit up straight. So that's a good thing. Okay, so how about if we take a short break now, 10 minutes, and then we'll have the talk afterwards. And we'll have a bit of time at the end as well, if you have any questions, any further questions that come up. I don't think there's any others. It's still hot. So the idea in the Tuesday night class was to have more basic talks geared more for people who are new to Buddhism, and then the Thursday night class is somewhat more advanced for people who've already learned quite a bit and want to go further and deeper into Buddhism. So tonight I'm going to just talk a bit about the Buddha and his life and what it means to be Buddha, what it means to be enlightened. So I'll talk for maybe half hour, 40 minutes or so, and then leave time if you have any questions. So the Buddha's life, it's actually, I can only talk about it in a short way because the Buddha lived a long time. He lived 80 years. So I'm not going to go into all the details of Buddha's life, but just tell the main points. And then there are biographies. If you really wish to know more about the Buddha's life, there are biographies you can read. So when the Buddha was born, he wasn't called Buddha, because Buddha, the term Buddha, is more of a title. It means awakened one or enlightened one. And so it's a title given to someone who has attained a state of enlightenment, which I'll explain a little later what that actually means. So when the Buddha was born, his name was Siddhartha. And there's different ideas about when the Buddha was born, because the thing is, at that point in time, this is about 4th or 5th century BC, the writing did exist, but it seems it wasn't used to write down teachings, like philosophical teachings, religious teachings, and so on. It was used for official documents, political documents, letters, and things like that. But religious and spiritual teachings were not written down. Instead, they were spoken. It was an oral tradition. So they were spoken, and then listeners would learn and memorize the teachings and then pass them on to their disciples. So this is how the Buddha's teachings, including the story of his life, were recorded for the first 300 years after his life and his death. And it was only after 300 years that they were actually written down. And so there's not much in the way of written records about the Buddha and his life, except in the Buddhist scriptures. So there's different historians will give different dates as to when he was actually born, but a common date is 563 BC. And he was born in an area of northern India, although at that point in time, there were many little kingdoms, and each kingdom had their own ruler, royal family, and so on. So the Buddha was born into such a family, a clan called the Sakya clan, and they were the rulers of this one area in India. So sometimes he's called a prince. He's referred to as a prince, and his father as a king, his mother as a queen. But they were really just local rulers over a small part of India. But anyway, he was born into a royal family, into a comfortable life. And at the time he was born, or shortly after he was born, his father, I guess it was the tradition to ask certain sages or, I don't know, special people who had special knowledge about a child, astrologers. I think this is still done today in some places, to give predictions about a child that's been born. And so the sages and astrologers were very impressed with this child, and they saw that this child would become great one day. And they said he would either become a great king, a great ruler, or a great saint, a great sage. So when the father heard that, he had his own idea about what he wanted his child to do. He didn't like the idea of his child being a saint. He wanted his child to be a ruler and follow in his footsteps. And so he tried to organize the life of Siddhartha in such a way that he would learn what he needed to know in order to become a ruler and take over the kingdom when the father became old or passed away. And so Siddhartha lived a rather sheltered and protected life. The father didn't want him to be exposed to some of the harsher realities of the world that might induce him to go off and live a religious life. So he had this sort of protected, sheltered life, very comfortable, surrounded by, all kinds of pleasures and beautiful people, young people, and entertainment and so forth. And so that is the way in which he lived. And the Buddha himself later said that he was pampered, he was spoiled. So he lived that way until around the age of 29. And then he began to feel more interest, more curiosity to learn more about the world around him. So he began to make some excursions out into the world, into the kingdom. And on these trips, he encountered some of the more painful aspects of life. He saw a person who was very sick. And this was like a new experience for him. He'd been protected from people who were sick. Sick people were kind of taken away, so he didn't have to see them. So he saw a person who was really, really sick and obviously feeling a lot of physical discomfort and pain and difficulty and so on. And he was very much struck by this, by the suffering of this person. And then on another journey, he saw a person who was very old, and body was bent over. He was having difficulty walking, and also looked like he was in a great deal of pain and discomfort. So this was his first experience or encounter with someone who was very old, with old age, because he'd always been surrounded by young, healthy people. And then he had an encounter with death in the form of a funeral. He saw a procession in India. Even now, when somebody dies, they put the body on a kind of stretcher and take it through the streets and bring it to usually the river, where they have a cremation ground, and then they burn the body there. So he saw this. He saw, body being carried through the streets, and the relatives of this person weeping. And so again, this was an encounter with one of the painful aspects of life. So these three experiences, encountering sickness and old age and death, really had an effect on him. He felt very, very troubled, thinking that this is what's going to happen to himself and to all his family and friends, to everybody. This is part of the human situation, the human condition, that as we go through life, we get sick, we get old, and eventually we die. And so it really changed his view of himself and his life, and he started losing interest in all the pleasures that were normally part of his life. He started seeing them in a different way, wondering why are we just playing, enjoying ourselves like this, when this is what's going to happen to us in the future. And then he had another encounter on an excursion outside of his palace, and that was with a person who was like a wandering a religious seeker or a monk, like you still see in India today, sadhus, people who don't have a home and don't have money, and they just wander around wearing some kind of simple clothing and spend their time practicing, meditating. So he met such a person, and he noticed this person looked very very peaceful. He had a very calm, peaceful face and smile, and his eyes were kind of bright and clear and sparkling. And so he came to know about that type of life, the life of a religious person, a religious seeker. There were many, apparently, in India at that time, many people who did this, who felt this strong wish to live a spiritual life and seek the truth, or seek nirvana, seek enlightenment, seek a higher state of mind, removed from the suffering and problems of the world. And so after meeting this person, Siddhartha thought that that's what he would like to do. He would like to follow such a life in order to find a way to become free of the sufferings of life, such as sickness, aging, death, and so on. So this wish was so strong in him that he left. He left his home. He actually tried to talk to his father about it, and his father was very unhappy about the idea of his son leaving home and becoming a spiritual practitioner. So he had to sneak out in the middle of the night and run away from home in a way. So then he spent the next 6 years staying in the forest. He first met with some teachers who taught meditation, yoga, different kinds of practices. He practiced what they taught and achieved what could be achieved by their practices, but he felt dissatisfied. He felt he still hadn't achieved what he was looking for. What he really wanted to achieve was an end of suffering and an end of the causes of suffering. And so eventually he went off by himself and just practiced very what's called asceticism. Asceticism is kind of a very hard way of life, like not eating, not sleeping, not giving in to your normal sensory desires, but just really focusing on the practice of meditation. And again, there were many other people, mostly men, but some women as well, who are also doing different kinds of yogic practices, meditative practices, and so on. So he did that for a number of years and got to the point where he was almost nothing left, because he wasn't eating very much. And there's a famous statue depicting the Buddha during this phase of his life. It's called the Fasting Buddha. It's in a museum in Pakistan, but you may have seen photos of it. It shows the Buddha with just, skin and bones, his ribs sticking out, and and sitting there meditating like that. So he came to feel that this way of life, of starving himself and being really hard on himself, wasn't working. It wasn't getting him to what he wanted to achieve, and he was so weak. He had almost no energy. He could hardly walk, hardly move. So he felt, this isn't right. This isn't the way. So then he decided to take some nourishing food, and that gave him energy. And then he, went back into the practice of meditation. And the story is that in a single night, he sat down under a particular tree, which is now called the Bodhi tree, in an area which is now called Bodh Gaya. It's named after the Buddha's enlightenment. He sat down under this tree, and in a single night, meditating all through the night, his mind transformed. He went through a series of realizations, and finally achieved what it was he was seeking, which was the state of enlightenment, the state of complete freedom or liberation from suffering and the causes of suffering. So to understand what it is that the Buddha achieved, this state of enlightenment, is not easy. In fact, it said that, one to really understand enlightenment, you have to be enlightened yourself. Okay, so for those of us who are not enlightened, it's rather difficult to really understand that state of mind. But we can still try. We can still get some idea of it. And one way of understanding the state of enlightenment is actually the name for Buddha in Tibetan. The Tibetan term for Buddha is Sangye, which is the first part of my name, Sangye. And that has two syllables. So the first syllable is Sang, and that means clean or pure. And it refers to the fact that the mind of a Buddha, the mind of an enlightened being, is totally pure or clean of all the aspects of the mind that are disturbing. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the evening, there are certain states of mind or emotions, we could say, disturbing emotions that are problematic, because when they are there, they arise or exist within our mind. Our mind is disturbed. It's not peaceful, not happy, not calm, but disturbed. They can also influence our way of being, our way of talking and acting with other people. And then it becomes disturbing to them as well. So, for example, one of the best examples of this is anger, hatred, irritation, impatience. So that type of attitude. So when we feel it, it's in our mind. It feels very disturbing, very unpeaceful, unpleasant. And then if we act out of that state of mind, we act in an impatient way, in an angry way, in a hateful way, then it becomes disturbing to other people, as we ourselves know, because I'm sure we've all had the experience being on the receiving end of somebody else's anger, hatred, impatience, irritation, and it's very unpleasant. Feels very and even frightening. If a person's really, really angry, they could become violent, aggressive, and so it's quite frightening to be in the presence of someone in that state of mind. And of course, there are many cases of people acting out their anger in such a way that they kill, they harm, they destroy, they cause a lot of suffering to others. So that's one of the best examples of a disturbing state of mind. So there are others that are maybe not quite as disturbing as that, but still, problematic. They still create problems for ourselves and others. So one aspect of an enlightened mind is that all these disturbing, problematic, painful, or we could say negative states of mind have been totally cleared away, totally gone, such that they just never arise. So in the mind of a Buddha, there's never any anger or hatred or impatience or greed or jealousy. So none of those states of mind exist. Mind has been totally purified of them. So that's the significance of the syllable sang. And then the other part of the word for Buddha is gye, and that means increased or expanded or developed. And it refers to the fact that the positive aspects of the mind. So all of us have, both negative, disturbing, as well as positive aspects. And those would be the qualities like love, compassion, patience, generosity, wisdom, and so on. So those aspects of the mind are good for us. When they are there in our mind, we feel good, happy, peaceful. And when we have those in our interactions and relations with others, then they usually make other people feel good too. As again, we know when we're on the receiving end of someone else's kindness and warm feelings and caring feelings and compassion. So it makes us feel good. We feel comfortable, happy, safe, protected, attracted. We want to be with that person and so on. So in the mind of a Buddha, those kind of qualities, the positive qualities, are fully developed, fully perfected, such that they're there all the time. They don't just come and go, but they're always there. So, for example, love or loving kindness in the mind of a Buddha is always there for everybody all the time. A Buddha is able to feel love for everybody, doesn't have hatred for anybody. And it's unconditional love. It's pure love. It's not mixed with ego, with attachment, with, having ulterior motives, wanting something for oneself, and so on. So that's a kind of simple way of explaining the mind of a Buddha. It's totally free or purified of all the disturbing or problematic aspects of the mind, and totally developed in all the positive and beneficial and beautiful aspects of the mind. So there's a lot more than that, but that gives us some idea of what it means to be enlightened. And so anybody who attains such a state of mind is called a Buddha. So that's the meaning of Buddha. The term Buddha, the title, the epithet Buddha is given to someone who has attained that state of mind. So it isn't that when we talk about, Prince Siddhartha, who became a Buddha, that he's the only one who ever attained that state. There are many who have attained that state. And also Buddhism says that we, all of us, all people, all beings, have the ability, the potential to attain enlightenment as well. And we use the term Buddha nature. We say that all people and all beings, whoever has a mind or consciousness, has the ability, the potential to become enlightened. So any mind can become an enlightened mind. Any mind can transform into an enlightened mind. Any mind has the ability to be free of all the problematic, painful aspects and fully developed in all the positive aspects. So this is one of the, perhaps the most inspiring and beautiful aspects of Buddhism. The idea that we can change ourselves, because some people may, after living for many years and seeing the way they are, the way their mind works, and they see, I have so much anger and I have so much selfishness and I'm like this and I'm like that, and they may feel there's no hope for me. I'm going to be like this always, forever. But that isn't the case. According to Buddhism, the mind can be changed, and in fact it does change. It's just the very nature of our mind is such that it changes, whether we like it or not, whether we try to change it or not. It does change. That's its very nature. We have the term in Buddhism, impermanence. Impermanence means change, and so like our bodies are impermanent. They're changing all the time. They're made of cells and molecules and atoms, and they're constantly going through changes. So our mind is also impermanent. It's also made up of parts, different parts, and it's changing all the time. So it's simply in the nature of our mind that it changes. And the good news is that we can work on our mind and bring about changes. So the negative or disturbing, problematic aspects of a mind, like anger, hatred, and so on, are not permanent parts of us. They're not like permanent fixtures that are stuck there within us, within our mind, and they're going to be there forever, and there's nothing we can do about them. They can change. And the positive qualities that we have, like love and compassion, even though now they come and they go, but we can work on developing them more and more and more until we get to the point where we can feel those states of mind all the time. So this is the message, one of the messages of the Buddha's teachings. The enlightened state that he attained, that he reached, is possible for everyone else as well. So, so after Buddha attained enlightenment, he didn't have any more work to do for himself. He finished his work. He'd reached the highest state that's possible, and realizing that no, other people could achieve this state as well, then he spent the remaining years of his life. He lived for another 45 years after his enlightenment. Then he spent the rest of his time teaching, traveling around mainly that northern part of India. Because in those days there were no cars or airplanes, so people mainly just walked around. So he walked around the northern part of India, and many people had a chance to meet him and learn from him. And even during his lifetime, there were many other people, both men and women, who listened to his teachings, meditated, practiced them, and also attained the state of enlightenment. And then his teachings were, as I say, transmitted first orally for several hundred years. Then they were written down, and so they're still existing today. We have the opportunity to learn them. So this term we use in Buddhism, enlightenment, saying the Buddha attained enlightenment. This term can be used and is used by other people and in other traditions, and can have different meanings. So I'm pointing that out because if you hear or come across the word enlightenment when you're reading, it's a good idea not to assume that everybody who uses the word enlightenment is talking about the same thing. So it's good to try to investigate. What do you mean by enlightenment? Because also, like, for example, in European history, we have this the Age of Enlightenment. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a historian. I'm not quite sure why it was called the Age of Enlightenment, but probably the meaning of enlightenment in that term and that expression is not the same as what we mean by enlightenment when we talk about the state that the Buddha achieved. And nowadays too, because there's so many religious traditions that are spreading around the world, some starting in Asia and coming to the West, but also there's new ones, new movements, religious traditions, and so on, and often they'll use the word enlightenment. But again, they may not be using the term enlightenment in the same way that we use it in Buddhism. So don't just assume that, one person's use of the word enlightenment is the same as somebody else's. So just to give an example, I came across this website of an American teacher who already passed away, but his students made a website with his teachings. And I don't know if this person himself, he was an American, I don't remember his name, but I don't know if he himself claimed that he was enlightened, or maybe it was his disciples, his students who said that he was enlightened. But anyway, that was the claim made on this website, that this person was enlightened. And then it gave a kind of definition. It said, how do you know if someone is enlightened? And it said that the person has a good sense of humor, and they're always in a state of sort of blissful samadhi, something like that. So that was their definition or their criteria for enlightenment. And I thought, well, okay, but it's not quite the same as what we would say in Buddhism. We would say you need a lot more than that, a lot more than a good sense of humor and kind of always being blissful. So anyway, maybe that's not a very important point for you right now, but in the Buddhist teachings, it is very clearly explained what is the state of enlightenment and how you reach that state, and it's actually quite a high achievement, and requires quite a lot of work and effort to reach that state. But even to just know about enlightenment and to feel some interest or inspiration to achieve enlightenment and start making little steps in that direction, that itself is already quite fantastic. And we'll find that starting to practice what we need to do to reach enlightenment will bring benefit. We will find ourselves more peaceful and more happy, and our relationships with others will go better, and so on. And then, so from next week, I'll start talking more about the actual teachings that the Buddha gave. Not every single teaching, but the main teachings, just so that you have a better understanding of Buddhism, what Buddhism is all about. But just another point I'd like to make before I stop is the way in which we, those of us who wish to follow the Buddha and his teachings, the kind of relationship we have with the Buddha, is that the Buddha, we see the Buddha as a teacher and a guide for us. The Buddha himself said that, we all have the ability, the potential to reach enlightenment, but it's something we have to do ourselves. Buddha can't do it for us. So it's somewhat different than other religions or spiritual traditions, where there's this idea that if you pray to some divine being, then you will be taken care of. Everything will be okay. All you have to do is pray, have faith, have devotion, and so on. So it's not like that in Buddhism. The Buddha is more like a guide, telling us there is this state that you can achieve, but I can't do it for you. I can't bring you to that state. I can't place you in that state. You have to do the work. So I'm just explaining to you, teaching you, guiding you in what you yourself have to do, but you have to do the work. So some people might not like that idea. They don't want to do the work, but according to Buddhism, there's no way that someone else can change our mind for us. So even a Buddha isn't able to go into our mind and fix it the way a car mechanic can fix a broken engine of a car. So we are the only ones who can fix our mind, who can change our mind, who can transform our mind. So the role of the Buddha then would be as an example, showing us what's possible, what we can achieve, and but then as the teacher explaining to us what we have to do in order to reach that state. And also in the teachings, the Buddha is sometimes compared to a doctor, because when we are ill, if we are feeling maybe feverish and coughing and lots of aches and pains in our bodies, so we know we're not well, we know something is wrong, and we usually go to a doctor and explain what's going on with us, and the doctor will maybe do some tests and then say, okay, you have this sickness, and what you need to do in order to become well is to take this medicine and follow this diet and get rest and so on. So the doctor will give us an explanation of what we need to do and some medicine we need to take in order to get better. But then we have to follow this advice if we want to get better. The doctor can't just snap his fingers and then we are better. So it's similar with the Buddha. The Buddha is just explaining to us what's wrong with us, why we are suffering, why we have problems, what we need to do in order to be free of our suffering and our problems. But then it's up to us to follow the guidance, follow the advice, take the medicine in order to be cured. Okay, so Do you have any questions arising from anything that I said, or please feel free to ask any other questions you might have about things about Buddhism you might wonder about.
Something I've been suffering about for many years is I have teachings like this, and sort of try to follow one of the masters or somebody that I get attracted to, yeah, and then I try to be like them, yeah. But the Buddha's enlightenment is the Buddha's enlightenment, not mine. Yeah, is that correct? It's not the experience of one person experiencing enlightenment and Buddha's experience of enlightenment is going to be two different things.
Well, as I understand it, enlightenment is a state of mind that has certain characteristics. Okay, so it involves certain realizations. There's certain things you have to realize, and then they also talk about abandonments. Like there's certain things that have to be cleared away, rid of. Your mind has to be free of, and so it is pretty much a standard thing. Once you have all those realizations and you're free of all those things that need to be abandoned, then you're enlightened. And so I think it is pretty much standard, that one Buddha's enlightenment and another Buddha's enlightenment are the same. It's not that one has more and one has less. But still, because each one of us is different, we have our own particular karma and our personality and our way of thinking and our inclinations and so on. Each one of us is different. So I think the way in which we practice and the way in which our mind will transform will be different, will be unique. No two people are the same. No two minds are the same. So that would be different. That would be unique. And I think that even when, let's say, both of us become enlightened, we're both enlightened, we've reached that state of enlightenment. And so we have the same qualities and realizations and so on. But I think there would still be some unique aspects because of the fact that we came from different places. You have your memories. You remember being Sean and all your other lifetimes before. And I have my memories of my past lives and all my experiences. So those would still be there. We would still have our own individual memories and our, what we did before and how we got to where we are now. So, so I think there would still be some differences within that. That might be argued. I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but to me that makes sense. Because also in the sutras, there's some, I don't know if you've read the Golden Light Sutra and how the Buddha he tells this story about this previous life where he was the prince, Mahadeva, and he gave his body to the tigress and so on. So, and he says, that was me. That wasn't somebody else. That was me. So he still has his own history, the history of what he did in order to become enlightened. And that would be unique for him. So each one of us would have our own story, our own history of what we did to reach enlightenment and so on. I don't know if that's answering your question.
It's useful because I suffered by trying to copy other people. So I read all these fantastic things and I try to live up to this stuff and it's impossible and I beat myself up all the time. But
I know what you're saying.
It kind of gives me the permission to own my own history.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be at the end of the day. I'm still going to have my own history, enlightened or not. So I have to work through certain issues to get it there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can relate to what you're saying because I came to a point where I realized that, I also felt like I had to be just like my teacher, like a carbon copy, like a photocopy of my teacher, and do everything exactly like that. And I realized, no, that's not true. And also looking at some cases of teachers and students, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, that he was the teacher and he was a student, but totally different, very, very different way of doing things. So that helped me realize that no, I I don't have to be just like my teachers. I have to find my own way and do things in my own way. So yeah, and it's never helpful to beat yourself up. That's not a, yeah, we Westerners tend to do that a lot. I don't think Tibetans have that problem, but it's a very common problem in the West that we tend to be hard on ourselves and feel guilty and feel inadequate and self-hatred and all that kind of thing. And that kind of thing actually doesn't belong in the path. And it's just obstacles, hindrances to the path. So we really need to watch out for that and try to avoid that. I went through that a lot. And so when I'm teaching, I'm always trying to point that out to people. Don't do that. Don't beat yourself up. Don't hate yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. It doesn't help. It just makes things worse. And we have to be kind to ourselves. And now I think, like, I don't know, there's this story of, I was a meeting with some Western Buddhist teachers and also psychologists and the Dalai Lama and some other Buddhists. This was back in the 90s. And they were talking about teaching Buddhism in the West. And one of the teachers from America was talking about how there's so many people in the West who hate themselves. And so when we teach meditation on loving kindness, you know, the practice of loving kindness, we have to teach people that they need to love themselves. They need to meditate on loving kindness for themselves. And the Dalai Lama was like listening to this, and he didn't understand what she was talking about, even though he does understand English. So the translator spoke to him for a while, and then finally the Dalai Lama understood it, and he was so surprised to hear that there were people who hated themselves and who were hard on themselves and mean to themselves. He'd never heard of that before. And he thought, you mean is that true? There are people who don't like themselves? And then he asked this group of people, how many of you have this problem? And almost everyone put up their hand. And many professional people, you know, Western people. So this was new for him to know that there are people who hate themselves. But this was like over maybe 20, 25 years ago. So now he's very much aware of that, and he addresses it when he's teaching. He talks about how important it is to love ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, compassionate to ourselves. Because if we don't, if we are not loving and kind to ourselves, we can't really be loving and kind to others. So this isn't always there in traditional Buddhist teachings, but for us Westerners in particular, we need to be taught that importance of being kind to ourselves. Anyone else? You can also ask about meditation. Any questions you have? Any problems you're having in your meditation?
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
About you?
About what?
About your history.
My history?
That was your first time here. And I don't think I've ever heard your history.
Oh.
Some of it. You have 10 minutes. You have to make it brief. About your meditation history.
Sorry?
About your meditation history.
Oh, my meditation history. Oh, no. Oh, I don't think my history is very interesting.
Yeah.
It would be a good start. You've been here for a long time, but I have to ask you another time. So.
Well, I grew up in California, which a lot of people think is a really fantastic place. and it is, I have to agree. But I was very unhappy when I was young, and I was raised a Catholic. So my parents were Catholic, and we went to Catholic schools. We went to church every Sunday. And when I was very young, I was quite religious. I was quite, I liked going to church. And I remember when I was about 5 or so, thinking about becoming a nun, because I thought it would be wonderful to just, devote my life to God. But then as I got older, I started running into problems. I found some of the teachings, some of the Catholic explanations of things just didn't sound right to me. And when I would ask questions in religious classes, I wasn't always given good answers. Sometimes there was no answer. I was told, you just have to believe this. You just have to take it on faith. Or they would give some answer that just didn't make any sense. So I started having doubts. My doubts started arising. And eventually, when I was about 13, I got to the point where I felt, I just can't do this. I can't be a Catholic. I can't believe this stuff anymore. So I kind of rejected the whole thing. But I still had this strong wish to understand the big questions, like, why are we here? Why is there so much suffering in the world? Because I was very much aware of suffering. At that point in time, America was entering the Vietnam War, and that was just really, really troubling for me. And the problem of racism in America, the Black people were demanding equal rights, and the white people were saying no. And anyway, there's just a lot of problems in the world, and I just couldn't understand why can't people be nice to each other and get along with each other and so on? Why is there all these troubles? And another question I had was, what happens when we die? So these kind of questions were really important to me, and I wanted to know answers. And so when I was a teenager, there weren't many books in those days about Buddhism and Eastern religions. Now there's lots and lots of books, but in those days, not many. But I started reading a little bit and getting to know a little bit about religions from Asia, from India, like Buddhism and Hinduism, Confucianism, and I just felt very attracted. And then as time went on, I learned more and felt more and more attracted. And finally, I felt this strong wish to go to India, which seemed to be the place where these religions were coming from. So by that time I was in university, but I didn't really want to stay in university. I didn't really want to follow the normal way of life, getting married and having a family and a career and so on. I have this strong wish to lead a contemplative life, a religious life. So I left and I went off to India. And first place I went to in India was Dharamsala, because I heard about the Dalai Lama. I'd had this interest in Tibet and the Dalai Lama from when I was a teenager. So when I heard that's where he was living, I thought, I have to go there. That's where I want to go. So as soon as I got to Dharamsala and I saw Tibetan lamas walking around and Tibetan people, I just felt this really strong connection, probably from past lives. And so I stayed and I started learning Buddhism, and that's where it all started. And within a short time, I decided to become a Buddhist and become a nun. And then I stayed. I had to go to Nepal, because in those days you could only stay in India for 6 months and then you had to leave. That was the visa rules. So I went to Nepal and Kopan Monastery, Lama Yeshe Lama Zopa. And I started studying with them, and that's where I became a nun. And we had a little community of Western monks and nuns living at Kopan in those days. So I managed to stay there for about 3 years. So that's how I got involved. That's how I started. And that was more than 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Yeah. So since then, I've been here and there, done this and that, and I'm still here, still alive, still a nun, still struggling, trying to learn, trying to practice. But I can definitely see benefit, and that's why I'm still here. I think when I first started, I thought, oh yeah, I can get enlightened in this lifetime, but I soon realized that that was not very realistic. Change is possible, but it does take time. Yeah.
What are your meditation practices?
What are my meditation
Yeah, your
practices?
daily meditation practices. And do you have any recommendations?
Well, in the Tibetan tradition in particular, we have a lot of different kinds of practices. And some of them involve visualizations and prayers, and some of them are more analytical, contemplative. So I have kind of a collection of different practices that I do, that I've collected over the years. And it would be a little hard to explain all of them. Some of them are kind of complicated. But I think that in the beginning, it's really good to start with the kind of practice that we did tonight, to learn how to, although it's hard to calm down the mind, it's hard to focus the mind, but it's very important to at least try to do it, because especially for us in the West, we usually start learning meditation when we're already adults. So our minds are quite full of stuff. Unlike little Tibetan kids who come to the monasteries when they're maybe 6 or 7 years old, and they come from the farm, or they come from being nomads, shepherds. So they don't have so much stuff in their minds. We have a lot of stuff in our minds. And it's very important to learn to sort out some of that stuff before we take in too much more. I heard one of the earliest teachers, Tibetan teachers to teach in the West, was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who started the Shambhala organization. And I heard that his advice or way of teaching his students was for the first 2 years to just do this kind of meditation on the breath, mindfulness. He called it shamatha vipassana. But basically it's just staying with the breath and coming back to the breath again and again. So he would have them do that for 2 years before going on to more advanced practices. And I think that's a really good idea, just to sort of get some space in our mind before taking in too many other things. But that doesn't mean you can't learn other things. It's still good to learn and study. But as far as practices go, I think it's good to start with something simple like that.
I find it's very difficult to find the time for meditation, because it takes time, and I would like to meditate 1 hour each day, but I find it difficult to find time sometimes. How do you find time?
Well, I don't have to do many other things. I don't have to go to work and look after kids and so on. But, Lama Yeshe, one of my teachers, used to say, even just 5 minutes, I mean, it's great to do an hour, but, if you can't do that much, whatever you can do, even 5 minutes, even 1 minute, to just do a little bit every day. And then when you do have more time, to do more. When you have a day off, a free day, or you have a chance to go and do a retreat, then you can do more. But yeah, even just a little bit each day, or a few times a day, to just stop and do a bit of meditation. That will make a difference. Yeah.
5 minutes is not enough to calm the mind. In my experience.
Yeah. But have you ever had the experience of just stopping and taking a deep breath? Just one deep breath. It'll make you feel calmer maybe not totally calm, totally focused, totally concentrated, but definitely calmer than you were before. So that's why I say even, just a little bit, will help. Rather than nothing, it's better than nothing. It's better than, some people think, well, if I can't do an hour, there's no point in doing anything. So I don't think that is a healthy attitude. Yeah, even just before coming here, I was in Israel most of last year. I was working with a group of psychologists, psychoanalysts, and some of them do meditation in between their patients. So they have like 50-minute sessions with their patients. And then in between each patient, they'll have like 5 or 10 minutes of break. And during that break, not maybe always have to use the bathroom sometimes or get a cup of coffee, but they'll do meditation in between seeing their patients. And they say it really helps a lot. Helps a lot in their work and just to increase their practice of meditation. So I think every one of us can find at least 5 minutes, and it will definitely make a difference. Every little bit helps. But it is hard. I still find it difficult. So if you're finding it difficult to meditate, difficult to calm your mind, it's understandable, especially in this day and age with all the stuff that's going on in the world and all the stuff going on in our lives, phones and internet and people, and the world has just become much more busy than it was 100 years ago or 50 years ago. So it just makes a lot more craziness in the mind. But still, we have to do something. We have to try to work on our mind, and just trying, just making the effort and trying is itself something beneficial. Definitely. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I want to try to make the 9:20 train to go home. So thank you very much for coming, and see you next time, next week. And any of you who are interested in the Thursday class, I'm planning to attend that. In addition to the Thursday class this week, we're also going to have a Saturday, a full day of teachings on Saturday. I'm actually going to be in Helsinki teaching, but it will be streamed here. So I just reminding you, because some people had forgotten about that.
At 11 on Saturday, yeah?
Huh?
At 11.
11, that's right. 11 to 5, 10 to 4. And
I have a 30 seconds announcement. Just thank you for coming, and on behalf of the volunteers, thank you, Sonika. On behalf of the volunteers, this center works on the basis of volunteering, and none of us is paid, but we get a lot of benefits, like when we come, then we get instructions and we have to meet. So if you may be interested into either sometimes arriving early on Tuesdays or Thursdays or Saturdays, or staying a little longer to help with the practical things of the center, you're very welcome to contact me or Martina, who's upstairs, or Sean, or other. Thanks.